The prison ship hung in the darkness of space like a rusted needle, its hull scarred by centuries of transporting the galaxy's unwanted. Inside, Commander Zexthor of the Calthrian Empire studied the latest batch of cargo with his 4 eyes, each pair blinking independently in disgust. Humans, he muttered, his mandibles clicking together. Why do we even bother? His second officer, a younger Calthrian named Vex, shuffled his clawed feet nervously. The Galactic Council ordered their collection, sir. Something about testing their combat potential. Zexthor laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Combat potential? Look at them, Vex, they're pathetic. Through the observation window, 300 humans huddled in the cargo bay. They were the weakest specimens Earth had to offer. The Calthrian scouts had been specific in their selection. No soldiers. No athletes. No one with military training. These were civilians plucked from their mundane lives. Office workers, teachers, shopkeepers, students, the elderly and the young. People who had never thrown a punch in their lives. Among them was Marcus Chen, a 42-year-old accountant from Seattle who had been taken while buying groceries. His hands, soft from years of keyboard work, trembled as he held his 8-year-old daughter Sarah close. Near them sat Elizabeth Okonkwo, a 70-year-old retired librarian whose biggest physical challenge in decades had been climbing stairs. There was David Kim, a nervous 23-year-old programmer who got winded walking to his car, and Jennifer Walsh, a high school art teacher who had never even watched a war movie because they made her uncomfortable. The Council's intelligence must be faulty, Vex said, studying the humans through his scanner. These creatures barely register on physical capability scales. Their bone density is average. Their muscle mass is insufficient for combat. Their reaction times are slow. Exactly, Zexthor agreed. But the Council wants to know if humans can be useful as cannon fodder. So we'll put them through the trials. When they fail, we'll have our proof that humanity is worthless to the war effort. The war effort. For 300 years, the Galactic Council had been locked in conflict with the Hive Collective, a species of insectoid warriors who consumed entire worlds. The Council needed soldiers, and they had been evaluating every species they encountered. Most failed the trials. Those who did were deemed unsuitable for anything beyond slave labor. Zexthor expected humans to join that list. The next morning, by Galactic Standard Time, the humans were herded into what the Calthrians called the sorting arena. It was a massive dome where captives were divided into categories based on their initial performance. The strong went to combat training. The weak went to the mines. Listen up, meatbags, Zexthor announced through the translation field that hung in the air. His voice boomed across the arena. You will complete a series of physical tasks. Those who succeed move forward. Those who fail become laborers. There is no third option. Marcus held Sarah tighter. Around them, hundreds of humans whispered in fear. Many were crying. None of them were fighters. They were ordinary people torn from ordinary lives, thrust into a nightmare they couldn't comprehend. The first test was simple. Climb a wall. It was only 20 feet high with obvious handholds. For the Calthrians watching, it was child's play. They expected the humans to manage this much at least. Marcus went first, urged forward by a prodding electric staff. He had never climbed anything in his life except stairs. His soft hands slipped on the holds. His arms shook with effort. Halfway up, he fell, landing hard on the padded floor below. Pain shot through his shoulder. Pathetic, Zexthor muttered, making notes on his datapad. Elizabeth, the elderly librarian, couldn't even reach the first handhold. David, the programmer, made it 3 feet before his arms gave out. Jennifer managed 6 feet before panic set in and she froze, eventually having to be pulled down by the guards. Out of 300 humans, only 12 completed the wall climb, and they were gasping, sweating wrecks afterward. The second test involved carrying weighted packs across a 100-meter field. The packs weighed 50 pounds, standard for Calthrian training. For humans unused to physical labor, they might as well have been boulders. Marcus tried. He lifted the pack, took 3 steps, and collapsed. His back screamed in protest. Around him, others fared no better. Elizabeth couldn't even lift hers. David managed 10 meters before vomiting from the exertion. By the end of the day, the results were clear. These humans were utterly, completely unsuited for combat. They lacked strength, endurance, and any kind of fighting instinct. When faced with aggressive training drones in the final test, most simply ran away or curled up in fear. Zexthor compiled his report with satisfaction. Conclusion. Humans, specifically those without prior combat training, are worthless as military assets. Recommend classification as Category 5 laborers, suitable only for low-intensity work under supervision. But the report never reached the Galactic Council. Instead, it landed on the desk of General Korthax, a scarred veteran of the Hive Wars who had a different perspective. Korthax had fought for 2 centuries. He had seen species rise and fall. He had learned something that bureaucrats like Zexthor never understood. The greatest weapons weren't born. They were forged, denied. Korthax growled, stamping the report with his rejection seal. Transfer the humans to Facility Omega. Begin Protocol Crucible. Vex, who delivered the response, stared at the orders in confusion. Sir, Protocol Crucible? But that's the program for elite warrior conversion. These humans can't even pass basic physical tests. Korthax's eyes gleamed. Exactly. They're weak now, which means they have nowhere to go but up. More importantly, they're afraid. Fear is useful, young Vex. But what happens when fear transforms into something else? What happens when the weak are pushed beyond their breaking point and discover they're stronger than they ever imagined? I don't understand, General. You will, Korthax said. These humans are soft because their world made them soft. But I've read the classified reports about Earth. Their history is soaked in blood. Their ancestors survived ice ages, plagues, predators, and each other. That survival instinct is still in their DNA. Buried under layers of comfortable civilization, Protocol Crucible will dig it out. And if they die in the process? Korthax smiled, revealing rows of sharp teeth. Then the Council was right and humans are worthless. But if even a fraction of them survive, we'll have something special. We'll have soldiers who earned their place through pure transformation. Those are always the most dangerous kind. The transport ship arrived at Facility Omega 3 days later. The humans, exhausted and terrified, were marched off in chains. They had no idea that their nightmare was just beginning. They had no idea that the galaxy's attempt to break them would instead forge them into something unprecedented. As Marcus stepped onto the facility's dark landing platform, still holding Sarah's hand, he looked up at the alien sky filled with unfamiliar stars. He thought of his home, his wife who must be worried sick, his normal life that seemed like a distant dream. He had no way of knowing that he would never be that soft, fearful accountant again. None of them would return to who they were. The galaxy had tried to prove humanity's weakness. Instead, it was about to create its biggest mistake. Facility Omega was not like the prison ship. Where the transport vessel had been merely uncomfortable, Omega was deliberately cruel. It sprawled across a barren moon with gravity slightly higher than Earth's, making every movement exhausting. The buildings were constructed from dark metal that absorbed heat during the day and released it at night, creating wild temperature swings. The humans were separated immediately upon arrival. Marcus screamed as guards tore Sarah from his arms. Elizabeth was dragged into a different building than David and Jennifer. The Calthrians had learned that isolation broke spirits faster than any physical torture. Marcus found himself in a barracks with 40 other humans he didn't know. The room was bare except for thin sleeping mats on a concrete floor. A single window, too high to reach, let in pale light from the moon's distant star. In the corner sat a bucket that served as their only bathroom facility. The smell was already unbearable. "My daughter," Marcus kept saying to anyone who would listen. "They took my daughter. She's only 8. She needs me." A man with graying hair and tired eyes sat against the wall. His name was Robert, a former construction worker from Texas. "They took my son too, teenager. We all lost someone." "That's the point. What do you mean?" "It's psychological warfare," said a woman nearby. She had introduced herself as Dr. Lisa Park, a psychiatrist from Chicago. Even in this hellhole, her analytical mind kept working. They separate us from the people we love. It creates desperation. Desperation makes people compliant. Or it breaks them entirely. The first week was designed to break them. They were woken at random hours by blaring alarms. Sometimes after only an hour of sleep. Sometimes after 10 minutes. The schedule was deliberately chaotic, preventing any rest or adaptation. Food arrived irregularly, sometimes twice in an hour, sometimes not for days. When it came, it was a gray paste that tasted like chemicals and sat heavy in their stomachs. The temperature in the barracks swung wildly. The Calthrians would heat the room until the humans were drenched in sweat, gasping for air. Then they would drop it to near freezing, watching the prisoners huddle together for warmth. Marcus lost track of time. Days blended together in a haze of exhaustion and misery. He thought constantly about Sarah. Was she cold? Was she hungry? Was she scared? The not knowing ate at him worse than any physical discomfort. On the 8th day, or maybe the 10th, Marcus couldn't be sure anymore. The training began. They were herded into a massive courtyard where General Korthax stood on a raised platform. He was enormous even for a Calthrian, with scars crisscrossing his carapace like a road map of violence. His 4 eyes swept across the assembled humans with an expression that might have been contempt or interest. It was impossible to tell. "You are weak," Korthax announced. "You are soft. You are everything that natural selection should have eliminated, but you are here and you are mine. For the next 6 months you will train, you will suffer. Most of you will fail. Some of you will die, but those who survive will become something your species has never seen before." Marcus wanted to scream at him, wanted to rage about the injustice, about Sarah, about all of it. But he was too tired. They all were. The training started simple. Running. Just running in circles around the courtyard. For people who had spent years behind desks, it was agony. Marcus's lungs burned. His legs cramped. After 10 minutes, he was walking. After 15, he collapsed. Calthrian guards moved through the fallen humans with electric prods, shocking them back to their feet. "Move or die," they said. "Those are your options." Marcus got up. He had to. For Sarah, he ran until he collapsed again. Got up, ran, collapsed. The cycle repeated until he lost count. Around him, other humans were doing the same. Elizabeth, the 70-year-old librarian, was on her hands and knees crawling when she couldn't run anymore. David was crying while he jogged, his face red and streaming with tears and sweat. The session lasted 4 hours. When it finally ended, 6 humans didn't get back up. Marcus watched as the guards dragged their unconscious bodies away. He didn't know if they were dead or just broken. He was too exhausted to care. That night, lying on his thin mat, every muscle screaming, Marcus made a decision. He could give up and die, or he could survive. For Sarah, he had to survive, whatever it took. The next morning, the running happened again. And the morning after that. And after that, each session, fewer people collapsed. Their bodies, pushed beyond what they thought possible, began to adapt. Marcus found he could run for 20 minutes before his first fall, then 30, then an hour. After 2 weeks of pure cardio torture, they added weight training, not with sophisticated equipment but with rocks, heavy stones that had to be lifted, carried, thrown. Marcus's soft accountant hands developed calluses, then blisters, then more calluses over the blisters. His arms, which had only ever lifted coffee mugs and file folders, learned to bear weight. The Calthrians showed no mercy. If someone dropped a stone on their foot, they were mocked. If someone cried, they were shocked with the prods. Weakness was punished. Effort, no matter how pathetic, was grudgingly accepted. But something was changing. Marcus noticed it first in Elizabeth, the elderly librarian who couldn't reach the first handhold on the wall, now hoisted stones over her head with shaking arms. Her face was set in grim determination. She never complained. She never quit. David, the nervous programmer, stopped crying during runs. His body was transforming, fat melting away to reveal wiry muscle. He had discovered that pain was temporary, but pride and perseverance lasted. Jennifer, the art teacher, had surprised everyone by being one of the few who never collapsed during the first running session. Years of standing while teaching had given her endurance she didn't know she had. Now she was helping others, sharing techniques for controlling breath and pacing. Marcus himself felt different. His body was changing, yes, becoming leaner and harder, but his mind was changing too. The fear that had controlled him on the prison ship was still there, but it had transformed. It wasn't paralyzing anymore. It was fuel. At night, in the barracks, the humans talked. They shared stories about their loved ones, about Earth, about the lives they had been stolen from. These conversations became their anchor, their reminder of what they were surviving for. "My son wanted to be a doctor," Robert said one night. "Smart kid. Always reading. I wonder if he's okay." "They're probably together," Lisa suggested. "The children. They wouldn't separate them by age like they did us. It's more efficient to keep similar demographics together." The thought gave Marcus hope. Maybe Sarah was with other children. Maybe she wasn't alone. "We need to stay alive," Marcus said. "All of us. Because when we get out of here, when we find our families, we need to be strong enough to protect them." It was the first time anyone had spoken about getting out, about resistance. The words hung in the air like a promise or a prayer. Around the barracks, other humans nodded. Something was crystallizing in that moment. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were preparing. The Calthrians, watching from their monitoring stations, saw the physical transformations and marked them down as expected adaptations. But they missed the more important change. They didn't understand human psychology well enough to recognize what was happening. These broken, terrified civilians were becoming a unit. Shared suffering was forging bonds stronger than steel. Every morning they struggled together. Every night they supported each other. The weak were protected by the strong until they became strong themselves. General Korthax watched the surveillance feeds with satisfaction. The humans were adapting faster than any species he had seen. Their bodies were responding to the stress with remarkable efficiency. But even he didn't fully grasp what he had created. He had taken people whose greatest challenge was rush hour traffic and thrust them into hell. He had stripped away their comfortable lives and forced them to find the strength their ancestors had possessed. He had united them through suffering. The galaxy had wanted to prove humans were weak. Instead, it was teaching them to be warriors, and the training had barely begun. Month 2 of Protocol Crucible introduced combat training, and with it came a whole new level of pain. The humans were divided into pairs and given staffs made of dense polymer. The instructions were simple. Hit your partner until they can't stand or be hit until you can't stand. The Calthrians wanted to see if humans had any fighting instinct buried beneath their civilized exteriors. Marcus was paired with a younger man named Tommy, a former fast food worker from Atlanta. Tommy was 25, skinny despite the muscle he had gained, with scared eyes that reminded Marcus too much of Sarah. "I can't do this," Tommy whispered, staring at the staff in his shaking hands. "I've never hit anyone in my life." Marcus understood. He felt the same way. Violence had been something that happened in movies, not in his world of spreadsheets and parent-teacher conferences. But the Calthrian guards were watching, electric prods ready. "We don't have a choice," Marcus said quietly. "But we can make it bearable. Don't aim to hurt. Aim to tap. We'll make it look real." They tried. They really did. Marcus swung his staff in slow, obvious arcs that Tommy could dodge. Tommy did the same. They were performing, not fighting, hoping it would be enough. It wasn't. A guard strode over and shocked them both with enough voltage to drop them to their knees. "Fight," the alien growled. Or I increased the setting. The next shock was worse. Marcus's muscles seized. His vision went white. When it cleared, something had changed inside him. The fear was still there, but anger was rising beneath it. Anger at these creatures who had stolen his daughter, stolen his life, who now demanded he hurt another human for their entertainment. He swung the staff. Not hard enough to seriously injure, but with real force. It caught Tommy across the shoulder, and the younger man grunted in pain. Tommy swung back, catching Marcus in the ribs. The impact knocked the wind from his lungs. They fought. Clumsily at first, then with increasing desperation. Around them, other pairs were doing the same. The courtyard filled with the sounds of staffs cracking against flesh, of grunts and cries and whimpers. Marcus took a hit to the knee that dropped him. As he fell, he saw Elizabeth across the courtyard, the 70-year-old grandmother, battering her opponent with a fury that was terrifying to witness. Her face was twisted in rage, and she was screaming something about her grandchildren. That's when Marcus understood. They were breaking through the civilized layer, finding the raw survival instinct underneath. The Calthrians were right about one thing. Humans did have violence in their DNA. They had just forgotten about it. The sparring sessions became daily occurrences. Marcus learned to read body language, to anticipate strikes, to find openings. His accountant's brain, trained to find patterns in numbers, now found patterns in combat. He got better. They all did. But the Calthrians wanted more than just fighting skills. They wanted to see human psychology under extreme pressure. The next phase of training introduced something called the Crucible Maze. It was a massive underground complex filled with traps, dead ends, and deliberate psychological torture. Humans were sent in alone with minimal supplies and one objective: reach the center and retrieve a token, then escape. The catch? The maze was filled with recordings of their loved ones screaming for help. Marcus entered the maze on a Tuesday morning, at least he thought it was Tuesday. Time had become meaningless. The entrance sealed behind him with a hiss, and darkness swallowed him. He had a small glow stick that provided barely enough light to see a few feet ahead. He walked forward, mapping the passages in his mind. Left turn, right turn, straight. Then he heard it, Sarah's voice coming from somewhere deeper in the maze. "Daddy! Daddy, help me! It hurts!" His heart stopped. Logic told him it was a recording, that Sarah wasn't really down there. But logic had no power over a father's instinct. He ran toward the sound, abandoning his careful mapping. The corridor twisted and turned, and Sarah's cries grew louder, more desperate. "Daddy, please! They're hurting me!" Marcus crashed around a corner and slammed face first into a wall. The corridor was a dead end. Sarah's voice cut off abruptly, replaced by cruel Calthrian laughter from hidden speakers. He collapsed against the wall, breathing hard, fighting tears. They were in his head. They knew exactly how to break him. For a moment, the temptation to just sit down and give up was overwhelming. But then he thought about the real Sarah wherever she was. If he gave up here, he would never see her again. He would never be able to protect her. He forced himself to stand, to breathe, to think like the accountant he used to be. Patterns, logic, emotion was a weapon they were using against him. He had to shut it off. Marcus backtracked, ignoring Sarah's voice when it started again. He ignored the recording of his wife crying. He ignored everything except the maze itself. Left, right, straight, map it out, find the pattern. The Calthrians had built this place, and they thought in patterns too. It took him 6 hours to reach the center. The token was a small metal disc on a pedestal, mocking him with its simplicity. He grabbed it and started the journey out, which was somehow worse because now he had to resist the urge to run. When he finally emerged into daylight, Marcus had been in the maze for 11 hours. He collapsed immediately, the token still clutched in his fist. Guards dragged him to medical, where they treated him for dehydration and minor injuries from stumbling in the dark. Of the 40 humans sent into the maze that day, only 23 made it out with their tokens. The others either gave up, got lost so badly they had to be extracted, or broke down completely. Marcus heard one man had sat in a corner for 8 hours, catatonic until guards went in to retrieve him. The psychological warfare continued. They were shown edited footage of their families, made to look like torture scenes. They were told lies about Earth being destroyed, that there was nothing to go back to. They were isolated for days, then forced into crowded rooms where personal space didn't exist. Every method was designed to break the human mind. But something unexpected happened. The humans adapted. Their brains, which had evolved to handle stress and trauma, began to build walls. Marcus found he could listen to fake Sarah and truly know it wasn't real. David discovered meditation techniques that helped him survive isolation. Jennifer used her artistic mind to mentally escape when things got too horrible. More importantly, they helped each other. When someone came back from the maze broken and sobbing, others held them and talked them through it. When the Calthrians showed them disturbing footage, they reminded each other it was fake, propaganda, lies meant to destroy them. The humans were learning something the Calthrians hadn't anticipated: resilience through community. General Korthax watched all of this with growing interest. His mandibles clicked in what might have been approval. "They're not breaking," he said to his second-in-command. "They're hardening. Should we increase the pressure, sir?" "No," Korthax said. "We move to Phase 3. It's time to see how they handle real danger." Phase 3 introduced live combat scenarios. The humans were given basic armor, energy weapons, and put into simulated battles against drones programmed to kill. The drones wouldn't actually kill them. The Calthrians weren't quite that wasteful, but the humans didn't know that. As far as they knew, every scenario was life or death. Marcus found himself in a squad with Elizabeth, David, Jennifer, and 3 others. They were dropped into a rocky canyon and told hostiles were approaching. The terror was real. The weapons felt wrong in their hands. None of them were soldiers, but they were survivors. "Spread out," Marcus heard himself saying. "Use the rocks for cover. Don't bunch up." He didn't know where the tactical knowledge came from. Maybe video games he had played as a teenager. Maybe war movies he had half-watched. Maybe pure instinct. But the others listened. When the drones came, flying combat units with simulated weapons, the humans fought back. Badly at first. Jennifer froze completely until Elizabeth literally slapped her and screamed at her to shoot. David's first shots went wild, hitting nothing but air. Marcus's hands shook so hard he could barely aim. But they learned. They learned that staying calm kept you alive. They learned that cover was essential. They learned to communicate, to work as a unit. They learned that fear could be controlled and channeled. By the end of month 3, the humans who had started as the weakest specimens Earth could offer were becoming something else. They could run for hours without stopping. They could fight hand-to-hand with skill that surprised even themselves. They could endure psychological torture that would break species the galaxy considered naturally tough. Marcus looked at himself in a reflective surface one night and barely recognized what stared back. The soft, comfortable accountant was gone. In his place was someone harder, leaner, with eyes that had seen too much. His hands, once only good for typing, now bore scars and calluses from weapons training. He was becoming a soldier. They all were. And the terrifying part was how natural it felt, like something that had always been waiting inside him for the right circumstances to emerge. The galaxy had wanted to test human weakness. Instead, it was discovering human adaptability, and that was far more dangerous. Month 4 brought the first real casualty, and with it everything changed. His name was Peter Morrison, a middle-aged dentist from Maine who had never hurt anyone in his life. During a live fire exercise, a drone malfunctioned and fired a real plasma bolt instead of a simulated one. Peter died instantly, burned from the inside out before anyone could react. The Calthrians treated it as an equipment failure, nothing more. They dragged Peter's body away and told the remaining humans to continue training. Just like that, as if a life meant nothing. That night in the barracks, something broke. Not in the humans, but in their relationship with their captors. Until Peter's death, there had been an unspoken understanding. This was training, harsh and cruel, but ultimately survivable. The Calthrians wanted to use them, which meant keeping them alive. Peter's death shattered that illusion. Marcus sat with his back against the cold wall, staring at nothing. Around him, others wept or raged or sat in numb silence. Elizabeth was praying, her lips moving soundlessly. David had his face in his hands. Jennifer was writing furiously in a journal she had made from scraps of cloth and her own blood for ink, documenting everything so someone would know what happened here. "They don't care if we live or die," Robert finally said. "We're just experiments to them." "No," Lisa, the psychiatrist, said quietly. "We're less than that. We're tools, and tools get discarded when they break." Marcus felt something crystallizing in his chest. It wasn't just fear anymore or even anger. It was purpose. Cold, hard, determined purpose. "Then we become tools they can't afford to lose," he said. Everyone looked at him. "We've been trying to survive their training," Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger. "But that's not enough. We need to excel. We need to become so valuable that they can't just throw us away. And then when the opportunity comes, we use that value to get our families back." "How?" Tommy asked. "We're prisoners. We have nothing." "We have each other," Elizabeth said, understanding dawning in her eyes. "And we have something they don't expect from weak humans. We have the ability to learn." That conversation marked a turning point. The humans stopped just enduring their training and started embracing it. Not because they wanted to serve the Calthrians, but because every skill they learned was a tool for eventual freedom. When weapons training happened, they paid attention to every detail. How the energy rifles worked, how to disassemble and reassemble them, where their power cells were located. Marcus, with his mind for systems and numbers, memorized the facility's layout during their marches from building to building. Jennifer sketched maps from memory. David, with his programming background, studied the computer systems whenever he could glimpse them, understanding their logic. They were still prisoners. They were still being broken and rebuilt, but now they were doing it with intention. General Corthax noticed the change. "They're exceeding projections," he told his officers during a review session. "Their physical capabilities have improved by 300%. Their combat effectiveness is approaching that of standard Calthrian recruits. Still not good enough for frontline combat, sir," one officer noted. "Not yet," Corthax agreed, "but we're only at the halfway point. The question is, what happens when we push them further? What is the upper limit of human adaptation?" He was about to find out. Month 5 introduced what the Calthrians called the Crucible Gauntlet, a series of increasingly difficult scenarios designed to push soldiers to their absolute limits. Most species took years to complete it. The humans would attempt it in 4 weeks. The first scenario was simple survival. The humans were dropped into a hostile environment. a swamp teeming with dangerous predators, both real and robotic. They had minimal supplies and 1 week to reach an extraction point 50 miles away. Marcus's squad now functioned like a well-oiled machine. Elizabeth, despite her age, had become their scout. Years of being underestimated meant she could move through terrain without drawing attention. David handled navigation, his programmer's mind excellent at pathfinding. Jennifer kept morale up, her natural empathy helping the team stay cohesive. Marcus had somehow become their leader, the accountant who saw patterns now seeing tactical opportunities. They moved through the swamp in formation, weapons ready. When a predator attacked, a massive reptilian creature with too many teeth, they responded as a unit. Overlapping fields of fire, covering positions, efficient kill shots. The creature died without any humans getting seriously injured. Did we just do that? Tommy asked, staring at the dead predator. We did, Marcus confirmed, and in that moment he felt something he hadn't felt since being taken from Earth. Pride. They reached the extraction point in 5 days, faster than any previous group. The Calthrians were waiting with the next scenario. This one was psychological warfare turned up to its maximum. The humans were separated again, placed in virtual reality simulations of their worst fears. Marcus found himself in a recreation of his home, watching helplessly as simulated Calthrians tortured a simulated Sarah. The detail was perfect. Her scream sounded exactly right. The way she looked at him, begging for help while he was held immobile by unseen forces, was designed to destroy him. But Marcus had learned. He closed his eyes and found the calm center he had developed through months of torture. This wasn't real. Sarah wasn't here. This was just another test, and he would pass it. He stood in that simulation for 6 hours watching horrors, until the Calthrians finally pulled him out, frustrated that he hadn't broken. Others weren't as successful. 3 humans from other squads emerged from their simulations, catatonic, minds snapped by what they had experienced. The Calthrians dragged them away. No one knew what happened to people who broke completely. The scenarios continued. Urban combat in a simulated city where every civilian could be an enemy. Zero-gravity fighting in a space station environment. Hostage rescue missions where the hostages fought back. Each scenario was designed to be impossible to find the breaking point. The humans kept passing. Something remarkable was happening. These civilians, who had never held weapons, were outperforming military personnel from other species. The Calthrians measured everything, and the data was undeniable. Human adaptability was off the charts. Their ability to learn from mistakes, to innovate under pressure, to support each other through trauma, was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. It's their social structure, Lisa explained one night, having had too much time to analyze their situation. Other species in the galaxy are either hive minds or solitary competitors. Humans evolved as tribal cooperators, were wired to work together, to protect the group. The Calthrians thought they were breaking us by creating harsh conditions. Instead, they activated our most powerful survival trait, teamwork. They made a mistake, Elizabeth added. They took the weakest among us, thinking it would prove humans were pathetic. But the weak know how to survive because we've always had to. The strong can afford to rely on strength alone. The weak learn to be clever, to adapt, to help each other. Marcus understood. An elite soldier taken from Earth might have tried to fight the Calthrians alone and died. But a community of ordinary people learned to survive together and became something greater than the sum of their parts. The final scenario of month 5 was the most challenging. It was called the Omega Trial, and only 30% of candidates from warrior species ever passed it. The humans would face it as squads, not individuals. They were placed in a large arena with limited cover, and told that combat drones would attack in waves for 6 hours. The drones would increase in number and sophistication with each wave. The humans had to survive until time ran out. Marcus's squad took position in the center of. The warfront was nothing like Marcus had imagined. The humans were deployed to a contested moon orbiting a gas giant in a system whose name they couldn't pronounce. The surface was scarred with craters from orbital bombardments, and the thin atmosphere required them to wear respirators constantly. They were assigned to the 47th Forward Battalion, a mixed unit of Calthrians, a species called the Vex who looked like armored centaurs, and now humans. The other species treated them with open disdain at first. Humans were the newcomers, the unknowns, the the species nobody had heard of before. That changed after the first battle. The Hive Collective attacked at dawn, which on this moon lasted 3 hours before the harsh sun made the surface too hot for combat. They came in waves, insectoid creatures the size of large dogs, moving with horrifying coordination. Behind them came larger variants, some as big as vehicles, with natural armor that could deflect standard plasma fire. The battalion's defensive line started to buckle almost immediately. The Vex soldiers, despite their impressive appearance, fought as individuals, each one trying to prove their personal valor. The Calthrians had tactics, but they were rigid, following predetermined patterns that the Hive had learned to exploit. The humans fought differently. Marcus's unit took position on the eastern flank, where the Hive pressure was heaviest. They moved with the fluid coordination learned through months of suffering together. When Elizabeth called out a weak point in the Hive formation, David immediately calculated the optimal firing solution. Jennifer coordinated their movements while Robert and Tommy provided covering fire. They didn't just hold the line. They pushed back. The humans fought with a creativity born from desperation and refined through brutal training. They used the terrain in ways the other species hadn't considered. They set traps, adapted tactics, mid-battle, and most importantly, they protected each other with a ferocity that shocked their allies. When a Hive warrior broke through and threatened a wounded Calthrian soldier, Marcus didn't hesitate. He charged it directly, using his smaller size to slide under its mandibles and plant a plasma charge on its underbelly. The explosion threw him 10 feet, but the Hive warrior died. The Calthrian soldier stared at him in disbelief. "You saved me." "Why?" "Because that's what soldiers do," Marcus said simply, then returned to his position. By the time the sun rose too high and both sides retreated to their fortifications, the human unit had the highest kill count and the lowest casualty rate in the entire battalion. Word spread quickly. These humans, these unknown creatures, were exceptional fighters. But Marcus and his people weren't celebrating. They were learning. Every battle taught them more about Calthrian military structure, about their communication systems, about how the command hierarchy worked. They memorized guard rotations, supply routes, and security protocols. They smiled and accepted compliments while cataloging every piece of information that might someday help them escape. 3 months into their deployment, everything changed. A Hive assault overwhelmed a forward position, and the retreat order came too late. 24 soldiers were cut off, including several human families who had been working in the support areas. The Calthrian commander declared them lost and refused to mount a rescue operation. "It's tactically unsound," the commander said. "We would lose more soldiers trying to save them than we would save." Marcus stood in the command bunker, his jaw clenched. Sarah was back at the main base, safe for now, but other human children were among the trapped. He looked at Elizabeth, at David, at Jennifer. They all knew what had to be done, even if it meant revealing how capable they really were. "We'll get them," Marcus said. "That's not your decision to make, human," the Calthrian commander snapped. "You're right," Marcus said calmly. "It's not a decision, it's a statement of fact. We're going, with or without your permission." For a moment, the commander looked like he might execute Marcus on the spot, but then one of the Vex warriors stepped forward. "I'll go with them," the centaur-like alien said. His name was Torex, and he had fought alongside the humans enough to respect them. "If they think it can be done, I believe them." In the end, 30 volunteers went on the rescue mission. 15 humans and 15 mixed species who had learned to trust the humans' judgment. They moved out at dusk, using the temperature drop as cover. Marcus led them through terrain considered impassable, paths too narrow or unstable for the larger aliens, but perfect for humans and anyone willing to follow their lead. They used Hive movement patterns that Elizabeth had been studying for months, timing their advance to slip between patrol routes. When they reached the trapped soldiers, they found them pinned in a collapsed bunker, surrounded by Hive warriors. A direct assault would be suicide. So Marcus didn't do a direct assault. "We make them think we're a full battalion," he whispered. "Spread out, maximum noise, use the echo from these rock formations. Fire from multiple positions rapidly, make them believe they're outnumbered." It was insane. It was brilliant. It worked. The humans and their volunteers created a symphony of coordinated chaos. Plasma fire came from a dozen positions simultaneously, then shifted before the hive could respond. Explosions detonated in patterns that suggested multiple strike teams. The humans even used their communications equipment to broadcast fake chatter, making it sound like hundreds of soldiers were converging. The hive, for all their coordination, made a tactical error. They retreated to regroup against what they perceived as a major assault. In that window, Marcus's team extracted the trapped soldiers and vanished back into the Badlands. They returned to base at dawn, with all rescued personnel alive. The Calthrian commander stood at the gate, and for the first time, Marcus saw something like respect in his alien eyes. "That was either the bravest or the stupidest thing I've ever witnessed," the commander said. "Probably both," Marcus admitted, "but we don't leave people behind." Word of the rescue spread throughout the Galactic Council forces like wildfire. The humans, the species everyone had dismissed, had achieved the impossible. Requests came in from other battalions asking for human transfers. Generals wanted to study their tactics. The Galactic Council itself took notice. This should have been good news. But Marcus recognized the danger immediately. The more valuable they became, the harder it would be to escape. They were being integrated into the military machine too effectively. Then Sarah gave him the answer. His daughter had been working in the communications center, as many of the human children did. They were good with technology, and the Calthrians were happy to use them. But being underestimated meant they had access to information others didn't. "Daddy," Sarah whispered one night, "I found something in the systems. There's a Galactic Council database about Earth, about what they're planning." Marcus felt ice in his veins. "Show me." What Sarah had discovered was worse than he had imagined. The Galactic Council had been observing Earth for decades. When they saw humanity's potential for violence and adaptability in historical records, they made a decision. They would harvest humans, starting with the weakest to prove the species' value. If successful, they would return to Earth for more. Billions more. The 300 civilians taken for Protocol Crucible were just the first harvest. The Calthrians had already marked Earth for large-scale recruitment. Within a year, they planned to return with fleets and take millions of humans to serve as soldiers in their eternal war. "They're going to enslave our whole planet," Marcus said, his hands shaking. That night he called together the human leadership. Not publicly, but in the shadows where they had learned to speak freely. Elizabeth, David, Jennifer, Robert, Lisa, and a dozen others who had emerged as natural leaders. "We can't just escape," Marcus told them. "Even if we got our families out, even if we somehow got back to Earth, the Calthrians would just come for more. We have to do something bigger." "Like what?" Robert asked. "We're 200 people against a galactic empire." "We're 200 people they trained to be warriors," Elizabeth corrected. 200 people they taught to think tactically and fight against impossible odds. 200 people who have been learning their weaknesses for months. "We end this," Jennifer said softly. "Not just for us, for Earth. We make sure they can never come back." It was an impossible goal. Suicidal. Insane. Exactly the kind of desperate plan that humans had been executing throughout their history when their backs were against the wall. Over the next 2 months, the humans prepared. They continued fighting brilliantly in the war, earning more trust and more freedom. They rose through the ranks, with Marcus eventually becoming an official tactical advisor. But every piece of view, access, every bit of authority was part of the larger plan. David and the other tech-savvy humans worked on understanding Calthrian computer systems from the inside. The children, underestimated and given access to sensitive systems, became the perfect spies. Lisa used her psychological expertise to manipulate their captors, making them see what they wanted to see. They learned that the Calthrian command fleet would be in orbit for inspection in 3 months. The entire leadership of this sector, including General Korthax, would be present. It was a target too good to ignore. The plan was simple in concept, nightmarishly complex in execution. They would sabotage the orbital defense grid,